Hey, it's Chris. I'm knee deep in giving you some long-term reviews for a lot of my Apple gear. So today we're on to the iPhone 14 Pro Max. This has been the phone that I've been using and relying on since it came out. It's been about 535 days so far. When this was introduced, it brought some significant camera upgrades, including a 48 megapixel main sensor and enhanced low light performance, also action mode for video, and a slight improvement in battery efficiency gains despite having a smaller battery size. Now, in something that's been a bit of a change for me personally, I'm just gonna get this right out of the way right off the bat. I've stopped upgrading my iPhone every single year. Why? Because I feel like I don't need to. Isn't that crazy? So I'm just like a normal person. I'm buying this for the long haul to just use it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not getting and reviewing stuff. Apple sends me the latest stuff, right? And I check it out and tell you about it. But personally, this is my personal device that I've just been using for my actual life and business. And that means I just got the 512 gig version. And of that 512 gigs, I've got almost half of that amount free. 226 gigs are free. And that's with me shooting a lot of 4K video, taking a lot of photos. We'll talk about that when we get to the camera section. But I'm able to keep so much of my storage free because I'm using a ton of iCloud storage. I'm using 1.9 terabytes of my 2 terabyte tier. And most of that comes from this device right here. Now, I remember when this came out, it had the 48 megapixel main camera, had the photonic engine, and one of the main benefits was that it was going to have really good low light performance. And you know what? That has remained the case. That's one of the things that I've loved the most about this. And I could really notice the difference when I would take some photo or video in a indoor environment. Maybe it was darker and you'd get that grain before. And I've really loved not having that. In fact, the camera has been so good, both photos and video, that even when I was testing out the 15 Pro that Apple sent me, I would often film content about that new Pro with my old Pro, and I would drop it into my videos, and I'd be like, really, to the naked eye, this looks pretty much just as good. Just year over year, despite actual improvements that Apple's made to the cameras, I haven't been missing not having the latest Pro. What's really crazy is I've got this carbon fiber Manfrotto tripod. It's been one of my best pieces of kit, for a long time for the channel. And I've got this MagSafe adapter here, which is from Moment. And I love just slapping this on here and using it to actually shoot real stuff for my actual business projects. And it's really super handy and portable. And I use it instead of my actual, I've got, I don't know, like 5 DSLR cameras in here. And this is just the camera that goes with me and I rely on more often than not anymore. The cinematic mode is not something that I've made use of, where you get that artificial bokeh blurry background within videos. We've had that with photos for years, where you kind of fake using a really nice expensive lens and camera system. It was a big deal in theory when that came for video, to do it frame by frame and have it look good. It's improved a lot since it came out. I remember being pretty disappointed with the quality when Action Mode came out. But the thing is, even with the improvements, it's still not something that even I, as someone who makes money on YouTube primarily, have been using. So for me, all the extra features are like interestings, not even nice to have. They're just kind of like interesting to have sort of things that I might use if I think about it, but they're not things that I would use on the day-to-day basis. I just grab it and shoot and put it back in my pocket. And the quality is the main thing for me. One thing I'll say about this particular iPhone is that it's been a really solid productivity device for me. And it's kind of weird to say. When I think of productivity, I usually think of my iPad and my Mac. Sit down and do some typing. But I find myself transcribing things more and more these days. And so if I have to type something, sometimes I will just type it out by voicing it on my iPhone into Apple Notes or something. Now, speaking of productivity, whoever you are, whatever you do, if you need to get more done in less time with less stress, maybe because you need to make some extra money or you want to have some extra time, some free time, then check out my course. It's called Learning to Be Productive. It's specifically designed for Apple users to help you get the most out of your iPhones, Macs, iPads, and other devices. Now, when the 13 Pro, the one that came before this one, was out, I remember it was like hailed as the most amazing battery life on a phone ever, and it was legitimately a pretty big deal. But then Apple sort of maintained that focus on all-day battery life for the 14 and then the 15, and they've just sort of kind of been in a stasis there. And my battery life is hovering at around 91% for the health of it. So that means it's dropped about 9% of its original capacity since I've had it, which honestly is considered pretty normal. That's about normal wear and tear for the iPhone 14 Pro Max. In fact, anything above 80% is going to be considered a healthy battery or good battery from Apple. Interestingly enough, I looked up the last 10 days of my usage, and I'm sitting at about 4 hours of active screen on time, with the screen on for the idle time being more like 5.5 hours over the last 10 days. So when you put it like that, that probably puts me more in the moderate usage realm. I know in the past I've definitely used my iPhone a lot more than that. I've been trying to cut down on how much my screen on time is. And by the way, I'm not using any of Apple's screen time features for that. This is just Chris's cognitive abilities and willpower, trying not to use the phone as much. Now, all that stuff aside, just because it's a healthy battery that's performing as expected, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily quote unquote meeting my needs. And what I mean by that is I don't want to have to charge it all the time. I can't wait until we can have a phone battery that's going to last for, 2 or 3 days maybe without having to charge it overnight, because it's annoying, right? To have to always do it. So I actually end up sitting pretty close to 10%, 8%. There's days when I finish at like 5 or 6% of my battery or less because I'm cutting it really close because I didn't go and charge it at night. I try to keep it out of the bedroom at night so that I have some mental space to think. That means I charge it in the office, which is way across the house. And so I do wish that the battery capacity was bigger. I know that's a big ask because we want thinner phones, less heavy phones. Now this is a Max, so I'm not necessarily slapping a battery case on the back, even though that's convenient with the MagSafe, and there's some cool accessories out there, but I don't want that extra bulk, So what I do want is just more optimization from Apple for the next iPhone that I get. And I don't want to hopefully just be stuck kind of in neutral at that stasis where it's just like good all day battery life. I would love to see a real bump. And for me, that would almost be like the key feature. The camera at this point is always going to be amazing on your iPhone. But if you could just bump this one thing up, I'd almost buy it just for a way better battery, significantly better battery, not just the same old battery life. So let's talk a little bit about performance. This is a Pro. It had the 16 Bionic in it for its chip. And, this is one of those situations where it's like, it's already so good, you're not going to notice the little minute differences unless you have a brand new iPhone side by side with your older iPhone, right? So when I had Apple's review unit and I looked at load times when I launched apps or games or something just to compare, yeah, the new one, it finishes like, a second or a half a second or a split second faster when it loads something than my current 14 Pro Max, right? So it's not enough to like super move the needle in terms of either feeling despair for not having the most recent piece of hardware or feeling like I'm on top of the world because I have the most recent hardware. It's just not that big of a difference. So one of the reasons to buy the Pro in my mind is to sort of have something that's going to remain nice and feel snappy far into the future if you want to use this for like 5 years. That's mostly where I really care about the chip performance. I'd say that's probably 90% of why I care. Now, in terms of the design, Apple's pretty much locked in and solved the problem of what an iPhone is going to look like or should look like. Unless we get a foldable, and even then, you're going to see the similar design language. You're not going to see a whole lot of changes, and we don't from generation to generation, right? The cameras might move around or get a little tiny bit bigger, or the bump might change a little bit. The edges might get a little more rounded or straight, which might affect the grip just a little bit if you're not going to use a case. And maybe some port situation is going to change. But overall, it's not going to look all that different. So what was different with my generation of iPhone 14 Pro Max was the dynamic island. Now, I've been living with it for a long time. The new iPhone Pros also have it. And so I want to report a little bit about how that difference has impacted or not my experience with the iPhone. As I predicted when I got this, the dynamic island doesn't bother me. And I think this is actually one of the slicker things Apple's done in recent memory in terms of software and OS stuff is they took something that could have been a branding liability, what used to be the notch where the camera equipment lives, because they haven't gone under the screen yet with their camera technology. And they turned it into something that's fun. And honestly, as I think about it, it's given a destination to things. Like if I have a timer going, I know that there's a place where that lives now. The dynamic island, that blob of black up at the top that I can tap on and edit whatever's happening. So ultimately, I think it would be cooler if the iPhone didn't have to have the dynamic island, so to speak, in the first place as camouflage for not being able to come up with a solution to get all of that camera equipment and some of the sensors under the screen. I think that would be better technically and cooler technically. But also, I haven't minded the dynamic island. Now, as you can see, this has an old lightning port on there. Doesn't have USB-C. Don't like that. One of my most hated things about the 14 Pro Max here. And the main reason is when you shoot really high quality video and you want to transfer it onto your Mac and it's too big to practically do with an AirDrop, right? It's nice to just be able to plug in an actual cable, get it transferred as fast as possible, in theory. I can't do that here, and that takes an excruciatingly long period of time, especially if you're shooting in ProRes with any good settings. The other thing is we've kind of crossed the Rubicon, so to speak, of it used to be the majority of my accessories were Lightning, and then this was Lightning, and only a few things were USB-C, and I didn't really have to worry about it. But now, most things are USB-C, and it's just this, really, that I'm hanging on to. So sometimes I want to charge it and charge it faster than I can with my Qi wireless charger that I have. And yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a pain to not just have one cable on deck that I can just know I can plug into whatever my device is going to be. It's not the end of the world, but it has been kind of annoying. Now let's talk about the display. This model has the always-on display. And I know some people felt like it almost felt like a broken experience having this always-on display because it seemed like it was on, it seemed like it was tappable, but then you tap on it and what it does is wake up instead of be interacted with, so to speak. And so I actually haven't found it to be too annoying, but I also haven't found it to be super useful either. I thought it would. I thought it'd be like glancing at the widgets, and I really don't. I really don't do that. Mostly probably because I have an Apple Watch. I don't know if that cuts into my widget glancing on the iPhone screen itself, but it's kind of been a non-feature for me. So if you have an iPhone 14 Pro Max or even a 14 or 14 Pro, let me know what your experiences have been if you got yours around the same time that I did, which was launch time. Don't forget to check out the course, whoever you are, whatever you do. If you need to do more in less time and be less stressed and maybe make some more money, then that course is perfect for you. And I'll link it up down below. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll catch you in the next video. Later.